I don't even know how you direct Willem Dafoe when he shows up to do that on a movie. You're like, just do your thing, man.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing.
Like
that.
It doesn't feel like it.
I don't know. He's just going for it. I guess Francis is really like... You're the first person in history to call George Lucas a poser. but I want to say one other thing about your Anglophobia before you let us just brush over this, which is that the one thing that most people have a beef with in English society is English food. Is just known to be terrible, and Kaya likes English food, but other
beans on toast is great.
Beans on toast is terrible. Beans on toast makes me feel so like homesick and awful. And welcome to the first episode of the second season of the Solo Moviegoers Club, a podcast in which me, Sean, and my daughter Kaya go see the same movie, but we see it alone in theaters on different coasts. I'm in Detroit. She's in LA. This week we went to see
Nosferatu.
And we haven't talked about it at all. That's another rule of this podcast is we are not allowed to talk to anyone about this. I sort of violated that a little yesterday. Someone called me and started talking about it. But we can't talk to anybody about this. We're not allowed to read any reviews. We have to come in as blind as possible and have a discussion about the movie that we saw. Really excited for this to be the first movie to kick off the second season because this is a movie that we were both extremely excited to see. And I am very, very interested to hear, Kaya, what you thought of this film.
So, off the bat, I was a little bit upset because of the fact that it looked and felt exactly like the original ones. Like, I felt like every single shot was the same. The setting was the same. Like, it was copy-pasted to me. But then, thinking about the movie after, I'm like, duh. Like, of course it's going to be kind of the same thing. I was just expecting there to be something different about it, like super out there.
So I think that was a strength of the movie. Okay, so a couple years ago, Gus Van Sant did a shot-for-shot remake of Psycho. Mm-hmm. Literally every shot. It was like they used the original movie as the storyboards for the framing and the stage direction, everything, the blocking. Sorry. Also should mention, I very appropriately picked up some sort of plague while seeing this movie. Like, as the plague rats were hitting the docks, I was starting to sweat in the movie theater. So I might sound a little weird. I might sniffle through this one, but we decided to do it today anyway because it's New Year's Day and Happy New Year's. And what's better to do than do a podcast while you're slightly ill talking about a movie that's about the plague. But yeah, so this wasn't that. This wasn't a like true shot for shot remake. I thought it very appropriately, like, obviously I was wondering if they were going to go there. I knew they would, like the very famous image of the shadows and the long fingers creeping along the walls. Like, those are such iconic movie images. People that have never seen Nosferatu, people have never heard of Nosferatu, the original, the 1922 version, they know that image. Like, that is an image, like, to me, like the two main vampire images in cinema are Bela Lugosi doing the popping out of the coffin thing, and the Murnau Nosferatu shadows on the wall. Yeah. Right. And this did that, and I thought it did it really appropriately in a way that felt like it was paying homage to the original. But I felt they did enough to freshen this up. Like, this felt to me like a fresh take with like enough reverence for the original, but also updating some things and themes and modernizing it.
Yeah, like there were parts of it that I really liked that reminded me of the original, like the text on the walls, like I don't know what those are called, like the slates that they have. Like, that was very much like the original one. And then also like the town, the way that it's set up, it was like, so I don't know, like in my head, I remember watching the original Nosferatu in school and being like, I can probably recreate this entire set. And it felt like that. It felt like a set to me. But I think that's just because the original was like that.
Yeah. And so just before we get too deep into the rest of the movie, what was your solo movie going experience like?
Well, I went the day after Christmas, very early. Um, and there were a ton of people there. I went at like 9 a.m. and it was like kind of a packed theater, to be honest with you. I was a little bit shocked. I wanted to go early because I knew like Christmas Eve, families always go to see movies, but that was wild.
What was your coffee situation?
I brought coffee from home. I made coffee and
Didn't
yeah,
you
it
make
was
fun of me for
nice.
doing that?
No, I do that all
Didn't
the
you tell?
time. But I make cold brew. The difference is that like I like disguise it. So I make cold brew at home and then I have plastic little cups that look like I got it out. It's not a to go. Like it's not like yeah, it
Like a
doesn't
Target
yeah.
Dixie cup?
It's not one of
Yeah.
those. I can't do
Okay.
that.
Yeah, sorry. I'm openly slumming it, and you're giving the illusion of not doing so.
Yeah, exactly.
So I actually had no coffee for this screening because I saw it at
Wow.
7:30 at night, which I'm normally a matinee person, but I was double featuring. I took Kaya's brother Atlas to see Sonic 3 earlier in the day, packed house. Then I went to see this at 7:30. I can't drink caffeine after 5 or I'll be up all night. And
Mhm.
also completely packed house. I was really surprised, 7:30 on a Monday night, and there were, I think I counted 3 open seats. So it was impossible for me to see if there were any other solo moviegoers or not because the seats were so filled in. But
Yeah.
it was also, I noticed it was like an incredibly diverse crowd of people in like
Yes.
every imaginable way, like completely white-haired elderly people,
Mhm.
packs of teenagers, some people that were like not young families, but families with like probably like kids your age or a little younger, and adults a little older than me. It was like all over the map. Like
Yeah.
it really looked like, when they cast commercials to look like sort of ridiculously diverse in the way that places other than like maybe airports and sporting events are. That
Yeah.
is what this theater looked like. Every single type of person you can imagine was just packed into this theater to watch this movie.
Yeah. I definitely did see a kid in there, like a younger kid, not like maybe a little bit older than Atlas, but that age with his family and tons of elderly people. But also I think like the Lily Rose Depp effect of it all has all the young people wanting to go see it.
Is
Because
that an
I know
effect? Does she
people
have an effect?
she has an effect. Everyone loves her. There are people that I know that like don't know the original Nosferatu movie. Like they just think that this is like Lily Rose Depp's movie. So that's kind of crazy, but yeah, there's something about her that everyone loves.
Um, it so interestingly, think I heard a little kid in this theater, and
Okay.
before the movie started, and all I could think was like, oh God, what are these
Yeah,
people
it's
doing?
really bad movie to
Granted,
take your kid
I'm
to.
not judging. I took my 9-year-old to see Deadpool versus Wolverine,
I
so
feel like this is
it
worse. Is
is.
this
It is. I'm
worse?
totally with you
Yeah.
because that movie is cartoony and hilarious. The violence is over the top and ridiculous. This movie doesn't have that much violence, but it's dreadful.
Yeah.
And there's tons, like the violence that is there is horrific.
Uh-huh.
And there's sickness and illness and death and child murder and like
It's
all
very
kinds of
shed. It's very much like
I
so
I was actually thinking about you during the movie, so I'm gonna out Kaya on this thing that she has where she is Anglophobic. She has a fear of all things British, particularly things that are 19th century British. And
yes.
granted, this was 19th century Germany slash Transylvania. I think because of the mostly British accents, like I felt like I was in, I don't know, some
It
small
like
British town.
it's like Anglophobia in the sense that like I feel really like ill and like there's like bad energy there. And like yes, that movie does make me feel that way for sure.
But oddly enough,
It's
the one
like
thing that
it's
most
the
people
plague,
don't
the
like,
food, the looks, like
the plague, the food, everything. It was like it looked pretty awful to live that. It made me very happy for
yeah.
living when and where I do. But I
Hmm.
want to say one other thing about your Anglophobia before you let us just brush over this, which is that the one thing that most people have a beef with in English society is English food. is just
Yeah.
known to be terrible, and Kaya likes English food, but other it like
Not
doesn't make any sense.
it's like beans on toast is great. It's like potatoes, that roast is good. I think it's just like really bad, ill-seasoned white people food that is like a little comforting to me.
Beans
Um
on toast is terrible.
I
And
love beans on toast.
beans on
I love
toast
it.
makes me feel so like homesick and awful. And
Yes, that's a good way to describe that era for me. It's I feel homesick thinking about
the
19th century
these are things we both
British.
stole from Kaya's mom, Mumsy. She uses the term shed to describe things that feel like "Ugh," and she uses
Yeah.
the term homesick in a way that I've never heard anybody else use that I've totally aped, which is it's like so fitting. I can't even think of there's certain things like what is it like the French term je ne sais quoi. You can't translate that into another
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
Similarly, Mumsy's use of homesick describes a feeling and a vibe that I don't think has a word put on it within
Uh-huh.
like normal English language context. So if you hear us using shed or homesick, we're stealing that, but they work really well. They're really effective.
Hmm.
But anyway, yeah, this movie I think makes you feel like you are at home sick in bed with the plague, and that's
Yeah.
why it's so effective. The overall thing, the main thing for me within this movie is the atmosphere and the vibe
Hmm.
are so perfectly executed.
Hmm.
Also, and this is part of the atmosphere, but the sound design. This movie is so loud. The rafters in the theater were actually shaking. It was so
Hmm.
loud. And
Yeah, I felt that
I thought that
too.
was really effective. I thought it did a really good job of in the same way that older movies used to before we had all this visual spectacle. Like other than a couple of very clear digital effects that I saw, at least I think, I'd be interested to see behind the scenes. But like particularly the in the beginning of the movie where Lily Rose Depp's character is seizing,
Yeah.
like that felt like that felt digital to me, some of the
Hmm.
manipulation of the body movements and the overlays and some of the things, but for the most part I would say that this movie felt like it could have been filmed 50, 60, 70 years ago,
Yeah, I
and
was
it was
thinking the
like it
same.
felt practical and sound and the sound design had to do a lot of heavy lifting, but yeah, the sets were beautiful even if they made you feel horribly ill. They were really beautifully constructed. There was no detail that was ignored. I felt like I was living in that time, in that place. I mean, I actually felt, and it's interesting because like the experiential thing to me, like I said in the intro, I started to feel sick during the movie, and I was
Yeah.
sweating, and I didn't know if it was because the theater was so packed and it was hot in there, or if it was because the movie was making me feel sick because these people were getting plague.
Yeah, I
It
totally
turns out I
felt
was just getting sick.
immersed. Like I was
Yeah.
transported into that world. And that's how the original ones made me feel, and that's why I didn't like them, to be honest. They made me
So you
feel
don't.
really sick.
It's just effective.
Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to for me.
So interesting. We talked about the little kid in your theater and the kid in my
Hmm.
theater. So one of the first, actually, the very first book that I ever remember that truly scared me. I thought I was very sophisticated, and I read an abridged version of Bram Stoker's Dracula when I was
Hmm.
maybe like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah.
And you know those abridged books. You had some of them when you were a kid. They've got like
Yeah,
some
tons.
illustrations in them, but it's like it pretty much is the book.
Yeah.
And that this actually kicked me into an obsession with those books. But yeah, Bram Stoker's Dracula was the first one I ever read, and there were no illustrations at this point in the book, but I so vividly remember it's Jonathan Harker is the name of the Thomas character. And Thomas is the character in Nosferatu, played by what's his name? The main dude, star of the movie.
Oh God, I always forget his name.
He's in everything.
He's in everything right now too.
Nicholas Holt. So
Yes.
Nicholas Holt's character Thomas, that character's name is I believe Jonathan Harker in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and when
Oh.
Jonathan, that's who Keanu Reeves plays in the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula, but
Okay.
that when that guy rolls up in his carriage, this movie immediately took me back to that and made me feel like I could vividly picture by the way even this abridged version was written like the atmosphere of, and I think the atmosphere of Transylvania, of Castle Dracula, which is then turned into Count Orlok's place. Did you know why Nosferatu is Nosferatu, by the way? Do you know why it's Orlok and not Dracula, even though it's obviously the same story?
I knew at one point, but I don't remember.
Because they didn't want to pay for the
Okay,
rights
yeah.
to Bram Stoker's Dracula. They didn't want to pay the Stoker estate for the rights to it, so they just changed the names of everybody and basically told the same story
Okay.
with a couple of little tweaks and twists. And so for a long time, it was actually hard to find copies of Nosferatu. You couldn't see the movie because the Stoker estate was just like constantly suing them, and it was caught up in this
Wow,
copyright
yeah.
battle, which is kind of crazy. But it's I think what's interesting. Okay, so maybe we should do our 2-minute summary, right?
Do we need to?
Do we need to?
I
Let me
feel
give
like-
let me give a really brief one.
Okay.
Okay, this is a story. Is obviously it's one of the classic stories of Gothic literature. Most people probably know it, but the story is largely about the Lily Rose Depp's character. What is her name? I'm looking at my phone. Is it It's
Ellen?
Ellen? Yes. So Ellen is a young woman. She's just been married. You find out very early on that from a young age, she's had these like visions or premonitions and like feelings inside of her that come to her in her dreams. They're very terrifying. But ever since she met her husband and got married, they've gone away. They've largely gone away. But now they're settling into their life together, and the visions are starting to come back, and they're pretty horrifying, and they always involve this one guy. Anyways, her husband seems to work in like real estate or something. It's kind of unclear what he does, but he's very money hungry. He's very ambitious. They don't have what he thinks they should have. He's trying to better their place in the world so they can build this life together. He's got this friend who clearly has all the material things that he wants. His wife says, I don't want the material things. I don't care about that. I just want you. He's like, no, I need to do this for us. I'm going to go do this real estate deal that his boss sends him out on. That's going to take him 6 weeks. He's going to have to go to this place called Transylvania. He's going to have to deal with this old count who has one foot in the grave, and he's then going to come back and have all the money they need to kick off their life the way they want, get out of their apartment, buy a house, and live a great life with all the trappings of what was then modern society. And of course what happens is he goes to the place, Ellen goes to stay with their friends, and he gets this castle, and this dude is pretty messed up. The count, the castle's like falling apart. The count seems like he's the only person there. He's like a kind of hideous creature person, which back then people had like weird ailments and things. Like I don't think you necessarily would have thought right away that this dude is actual undead monster, because
Like his fingers, like when they first showed his hands, I was thinking like, oh my God, this is what people looked like in 19th century Britain.
Transylvania and Germany. Even though, yes, it does feel British because of the accents, with the
British.
exception of Orlok himself, who has the wildest voice I've ever heard in a movie, I think. But so while Thomas is there dealing with the count, trying to get this real estate transaction done, he starts to feel ill. Meanwhile, Ellen's visions and things that come to her at night are getting worse and worse and worse. Everybody around her is worried. They sort of treat her as like traditional, patriarchal, hysterical woman treatment. So they're like, oh, we need to control her. First, they want to confine her with what's one of those things called that they put on at night? What do they call it? They tell her she needs to put on it's a thing, a corset.
Corset.
They need to wear a corset, and then the corset doesn't work. So then they start tying her to the bed. Tying her to the bed's not enough, so they start giving her ether. It's like your classic kind of like the way that society treated women is, you're having a problem. Oh, you must be crazy. If you're crazy, we're just going to medicate you until your craziness ends. And meanwhile, it seems like she really does have a good bond with the woman who she's friends with, who lives there, and with their kids. So she's living kind of like a nice life by day and a pretty hideous existence by night. And it gets worse and worse. Meanwhile, Thomas starts to realize that nothing is well where he is. He realizes he wakes up with these bite wounds on his chest. He's getting sicker and sicker. He tries to escape. He can't. At one point, he tries to. There's wolves in this castle. It's just like wolves chilling. And nobody really there. It's just Count Orlok and these wolves. So eventually, as he's like getting sick, Thomas gets this real estate transaction done. He says he's going to leave. The Count says, no, it's a bad omen to travel while you're sick. You're gonna have to stay with me for a while. Thomas said he would send letters home to Ellen every day. He doesn't send any letters home. All of this comes to a head when Ellen starts to say he's coming, he's coming, he's coming, and they're like, what are you talking about? And then there's this other guy who went into a mental institution who you've come to find out is actually the boss of Thomas, who sent him to this place, who's also saying he's coming. And this guy's starting to lose it. He's like eating sheep. He's
Dude, this was so terrifying to me. This little like side story of this old man, his boss. Like,
it's pretty horrifying.
So scary.
This guy is clearly, you come to find out, like worshiping the Count. And
yeah, he's the reason why Thomas like was going on this trip anyway. Like there was already something with Nosferatu sort of like brewing, and so he's like, you need to go to this old Count.
Yeah, and so they're trying to buy a new castle for this Count in the city in Germany where these people live. Yeah. And so as this is happening, you start to realize that the Count Thomas has escaped, and he's being healed by these local villagers and these nuns, and the Count is basically put himself in a coffin and is on a ship on the way from Transylvania to Germany to this town. Ellen is getting sicker and sicker. They've brought in another guy. This is where the movie really takes off to me, is they bring in Willem Dafoe, who
he's
Willem
in everything.
Dafoe, he is. We're beyond the bounds of our 2 minutes, but I feel like this has just turned into a discussion about the movie, so like let's let it roll. So Willem Dafoe is now at the place where Christopher Walken was 20 years ago, which is, we need a ringer who's an amazing actor who can show up and contextualize this movie. He's going to add a dose of crazy, but he's also going to contextualize the whole movie for the audience and make everything make sense. So he's this disgraced psychiatrist who's become some sort of occultist. He's like an occultist. Well, he refers to himself as a tourist in the occultist world. But he's been kicked out of the medical society of the day, and they bring him in, and they're hoping, the psychiatrist that's been working with Ellen is hoping that this guy can provide some medical diagnosis for what's wrong with her, because nothing's working. She's just getting worse. And instead, his diagnosis is, I'm very sorry, fellas, she's possessed by a demon. And the guy she's been saying to, Thomas's friend, is like, come on, there's not a demon. There's some medical, like, you have to give, this is why they threw you out of the medical establishment. But the psychiatrist isn't so quick to disbelieve Willem Dafoe. So anyways, Willem Dafoe gets very interested in this. He hears about this other guy in the mental institution, the boss of Thomas, who's locked up. They uncover basically like the ritual chamber of the the dude that Thomas was working for, and it holds the answers to what's going to happen, which is that this Count is going to land, this demon, this Nosferatu is going to land in their town. He's going to unleash a plague, and only Ellen, by sacrificing herself, can stop the plague. Well, as they're realizing this, cut to a ship. Some rats are on the ship. Some people are getting plague. It's the ship that Orlok is on. So I don't know how much time passes exactly, but somehow Thomas makes his way back to Germany, to the city where they live in. He reunites with Ellen. Thomas and Ellen get kicked out of the friend's house because she's still acting crazy. He's not well. The ship arrives in Germany, and thousands of rats come into the city. And this is the thing that used to happen, where everybody on a ship would get the plague and they would die, and the ship would run aground, and the rats would run into the city, and they would call it a plague ship. And everybody in the town would then get plague. So the city, over the course of like 48 hours, it feels like, just starts to fall to the plague. While this is happening, Willem Dafoe, his psychiatrist friend, and Thomas get together, and they're like, we have to stop this. We have to kill this monster. We have to root him out. Ellen is continuing to have her problems. She's like, no, we're together. You can't go after him. Meanwhile, it takes place over 3 days. Because what the Count says
I remember, like, it felt very long, too, because in the original, they would have, like, day 1, day 2, day 3 countdown, and it was, like, 14 days or whatever, and I was just like, this is way too long. In this movie, it felt like it was just, like, taking forever. But, yeah, continue.
Yeah, it's over 3 days, and on the first day, the Count says if Ellen doesn't submit to him. By the way, this deal that Thomas signed with the Count wasn't actually to buy this new house. It was to give up Ellen, to annul his marriage to Ellen.
They made it seem in this version that like he didn't know that, but I'm pretty sure in the original he knew.
Yeah,
Correct?
I think you're right. I think he knows, and does it for the gold. But in this one, he didn't. They made him a little more likable. He's kind of useless up until the end. Like
truly, yes.
This
like,
which has been a problem we've been seeing in movies lately, right? Like, what was it we saw? What was the movie we saw with the front room?
Yeah.
This
also,
husband
Nora,
wasn't
like,
as useless as that husband.
Men, no, like they're very weak men. Roles.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that's happening right now. I think art is I don't know, reflecting society, or maybe art is like is giving is art's reflecting society, or art is saying something about the women holding up society and men were the heroes forever, and maybe it's not their time to be the heroes in these movies anymore. But he's not like a Thomas is not a bad character. He's not an unlikable guy at all. He's
very weak.
He's weak.
And he gets walked all over.
Yeah, he lets the Count take him over pretty quickly without really much of a fight. But anyways, it all leads to the point where the Count is going to start taking things away from Ellen. So I forget what the first one is. I'm going to make somebody sick around you. So like her friend gets the plague, and then I'm going to take someone away from you. So the Count kills her friend and her friend's daughters, which is really horrific. That's the first like truly horrific scene in the movie. And then maybe there was one before, but that's the most horrific. And then after that, I'm going to kill your husband. And so she's like, you have to let me go to him or he's going to kill you. And he's like, no, I'm going to kill him first. Willem Dafoe's character, Thomas, and the other psychiatrist, they are going to the new castle to kill the Count. But what Willem Dafoe's character knew is that the only way to kill the Count is for the Count to get caught out of his coffin after the first crow of cock in the morning. And so he knows the only way to do that is if Ellen essentially seduces him and takes him in and sacrifices herself to do this. And of course Thomas is never going to agree to this. So Willem Dafoe, whose character's name is irrelevant, it's just Willem Dafoe, he and Ellen conspire behind his back to like basically distract Thomas, go to the Count's place, burn it down, kill all these rats, knowing that this is going to keep Thomas away from Ellen so that Ellen can welcome the Count in. The Count can feast on her. She can then use her strength to say, we're not done yet, continue feasting. And the cock will crow and it will kill the Nosferatu, which is what happens. She sacrifices herself, ends the plague, saves the world. Is that it?
Yeah. It's funny that you keep saying Willem Dafoe because I feel the same way about him. He's so theatrical. I feel like he's just like him in every movie. Like I can't see a character. I see him.
But and Christopher Walken was the same thing 20 years ago, where it's like he shows up. I don't even know how you direct Willem Dafoe when he shows up to do that on a movie. You're like, just do your thing, man.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing.
Like
that.
It doesn't feel like it.
I don't know. He's just going for it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I like you said, I felt so immersed in this movie that even though this was a truly like every moment of this movie is just filled with dread. There's not like it was interesting with an audience to see this because it's horrifying, but there aren't really many jump scares.
Yeah.
And so there's not much of an audience reaction at all. Like you're in this movie and you're just like dialed in, and then the movie
very
ends.
Funeral vibes.
Yeah, it is. It's like a funeral dirge. It's like a death dirge.
Yeah.
But I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I'm glad that it exists. I'm glad that it was made. I think it's like an incredible piece of art that is like have you seen Robert Eggers' other movies? The Witch was his first one, and then The Lighthouse and The Northman.
No, I wanted to see The Lighthouse, but I heard it was very dreadful as well. Very sad.
No, The Lighthouse is hilarious. Like, as far
Really?
as I am concerned, The Lighthouse is an absolute screwball comedy. Like, The Lighthouse is a horror movie the same way that Honora is a drama.
Okay.
It's again, it's Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson. They're these
Yeah.
dudes that are manning this remote lighthouse over the
Uh-huh.
course of, I don't know what it is, like 90 days or something, or might even be less than that. But they completely lose their minds and start attacking each other. And there's like a siren involved that's talking to them.
Hmm.
There's a it is
I
a
really wanted to
wild
see
movie.
that.
It's so good. I can't believe it exists, actually, because it's so weird and so good. And his first movie, The Witch, is a movie that actually really upset me because it's phenomenal. I believe it's the first or second. It's one of the first things. It's the first time that I became aware of Anya Taylor-Joy,
Okay.
and she is the titular witch. Well, I guess she is and isn't. There's another witch, but um, that's actually an interesting question. There's kind of two witches, but this movie is about this. It's again, it starts out with like a small town, a small like folksy town,
Hmm.
and her family gets exiled away from the church, which means they're sent out to the woods, and of course, there's a witch living in the woods, and it's all these things that affect their family. It's like a small domestic horror movie that was made for very little money that really anybody could make, and it bothered me because I was like, I could come up with the resources, and at the time the cast was completely unknown. So
Yeah.
this is just a dude with a vision who goes off with some people and makes this super vibey, super cool movie that had one of the most horrifying jump scares ever. In the film I made, We Need to Do Something, there's a moment in that where there's a jump scare that something speaks that shouldn't speak. The witch does that. I'm not going to ruin it for you because you could see it, but there's a moment where it's like it's very we're very heavily inspired by what happened in this because it's one of those few things in a movie where it gives you existential dread, where you're so
Hmm.
into the movie and you're so locked in that this thing that shouldn't happen happens, and you're like, oh my god, what is real? Like, what is
Hmm.
reality? And when a movie can do that, I know that it's powerful because it's got you have to be
Yeah.
into the world of those characters to do that. And I think that's what Robert Eggers is a master of. And so then when he went and made this like wild screwball movie, The Lighthouse, and then The Northman is like his Viking epic, this feels to me the most like, okay, they gave that dude that made The Witch uh, a huge amount of money to go off and just do his dream theater project of
Hmm.
Nosferatu that he's wanting to make since he was a teenager. And
Yeah.
I think that this is like the best example I've seen. Maybe first of all, like his vision is so there's a moment, the moment where the villagers. So Thomas, on his way to Transylvania, stopped in a village, and all the villagers told him not to go to the castle. Leave the castle alone. Don't mess with the castle. We don't mess with the castle. Leave that evil
Mhm.
there. And like when people would die in their community, they would put stakes through their hearts to prevent vampires. And it looked like maybe they were going to sacrifice that girl. There was like the naked girl on the
For
horseback and like
sure.
the
Yeah.
torches. That scene, the way that that's shot, the way that that feels, the vibe of that is the movie The Witch. The Witch feels
Okay.
like that, like every frame of the movie. And I was like, oh my god, this is what happens when you take a filmmaker that has an incredibly personal vision and you give them the resources to be able to tell a bigger version of that vision. It was like so beautiful to see somebody's filmmaking career progress like that and see them actually get what they deserve to be able to make what is now a super successful movie, which is crazy to me, by the way. This movie should not be successful. This is a dark, feel bad movie that is incredible. Like, it's art house aesthetic across the board,
Yeah.
and it's, I know you said there's a Lily Rose Depp effect, and obviously there's Willem Dafoe, but there's not like like Tom Cruise isn't in this movie. There's not like a major
Yeah.
movie star draw to it. It's
It's
like
like the
niche.
girlies who like Lily Rose Depp. Like that's such a like small group of life, I feel like.
Yeah,
It's
it isn't like, this is not the movie that I think would be packing theaters across the country
no.
on Christmas, Christmas, Christmica,
Yeah.
New
Do
Year's
you
week.
think I feel like this has been the most packed that I've seen the theater since we started doing this.
100%. Gladiator was pretty packed. This
It
is the
wasn't
most
as
packed.
packed. Yeah.
I haven't seen this since we started doing this. This was Barbenheimer packed.
Yeah.
And like I know everyone was talking about Glickid, but I think that this to
Ew.
me was like the most surprising. Just this, also, this was not released by a major studio. This is Focus Features. This was an independent film.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that an independent film is doing this well is incredible. It's like this and
Yeah.
Terrifier are the two big movie stories of the year. Is and that's what's crazy is they're both these like weird horror movies. Why is it doing so well? Sure, it's a vampire movie, and you can always sell that to people. Like, go see the vampire movie that has an awesome trailer, right? And people will want to do that, but it's because it's just something different. I think that
Yeah.
after 10 years of Marvel movies, and I do love some of the Marvel movies, by the way. I also need to say that the Venom movies are, as far as comic book movies are concerned, something very, very different that critics tend to hate on. I think they're the best thing that the comic book world has done in at least 6 years. Venom movies are phenomenal,
Okay.
and they're just very, very different and very funny. But I think that people got so sick of, like, I can't even think what else was in the theater, like from 2018 until last year, aside from like a couple of my own movies. What was in the theater that worked?
Um,
Barbie and Oppenheimer.
yeah,
That's
that's
it.
what I'm thinking. And I feel like the Elvis movies. But that was like last year. Like I feel like truly before that I can't really remember anything.
Yeah, what was the Barbarian, I guess, sort of
Yeah.
worked, but again, that's a weird horror movie.
Or
And
like
I don't
Bones
think
and All.
yeah, and I don't think these movies have to be horror always necessarily, but I think that people just want to see something that's different from what they've been seeing, which is a
Yeah.
return to the way movies used to be. It's like you went to have a different experience that you weren't having elsewhere, and I think we're coming back to that, which I think it's really funny because if you look at it, like the Hollywood trades, that I don't know who our audience is for this podcast, by the way. I should probably know that. I don't know if this is like movie people, non-movie people, casual moviegoers, film industry people, whatever. But if you're paying attention to what movies are working and like what the vibe of Hollywood is, people think like mainstream Hollywood thinks the industry is dying because
Yeah.
it's the box office still isn't what it was before 2020. But I think they're missing the point is that, like, yeah, sure, the 150 $200 million movies aren't doing as well. Well, like, stop being dumb and make $50 million movies that like
Yeah.
that can work well. Make $20 million movies that can work well. If you look at what happened in, so movies started to really fall off in the late 80s. Like, people were worried that Hollywood was dying. They always blame something else, right? They blamed VHS. And they're like, oh, people can record movies and watch
Oh
them at their
my
house. Like,
God.
no, like, idiots. This is making people love movies more because they can watch things and study things and watch them over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Similarly to the way, the fact was they were just making bad movies. Like, if you go back
Yeah.
and watch some of those movies of that era, of like the late 80s and early 90s, it is
Okay,
rough.
that's my favorite era of movies, but
Well,
whatever.
no, you actually like the movies coming right out of that. Like early
Okay.
90s,
Okay.
things start to get weird. So in like 1989, I think was when Sex Lies and Videotape was at Sundance and became this big success. And shortly after that, we had Reservoir Dogs, and then you have Pulp Fiction, and you have Clerks, and like that late 80s to mid 90s
Okay.
period of the explosion of independent movies.
Yeah.
Then studios started to make more interesting movies, and you got like the movies you love, like the early Adam Sandler movies and all those things that were born out of like that SNL era. So Hollywood always just starts to suck, and I will tell you why. This is not going to make me many friends if people from Hollywood are listening to this. It's because Hollywood becomes overtaken by the executive class, and you've got these bloated ranks of people who are not movie people. They call themselves movie people. They're not movie people. Like, go write something, go make something, go take a camera, go tell people to do something. They cannot do this. There are people who sit in rooms and talk to each other and tell a bunch of people no and don't make anything interesting and prevent interesting things from happening. When those people, this happened in the 50s and 60s when there was nothing but cowboy movies.
Yeah.
And then what came out of that were, the famous like Peter Biskin book, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, came the 1970s independent movement. And then that gets too successful and the executive class gets too much power. And then you get the movies that suck in the 80s. And then you get the 90s that become really interesting. And then you go into this weird era of bloated comic book movies and streaming movies, and it's all executive class power again, and the movies start to suck. But now I think we're turning that corner where
Same.
where things are getting really interesting again. There's like not a more exciting time to be a moviegoer, and everyone's blaming. They're like, "Oh, we can't compete with social media." Like, no, social media, like social media is where people go to talk about movies.
Yeah.
You just evolve, and don't make such
different thing.
expensive movies.
Yeah.
And don't make the same thing over and over again.
And it's also like people right now complaining about AI and that taking over and making movies like super one-dimensional and not interesting. But like it's just evolving differently. Like I don't know.
Use
feel
AI.
like-
Use it to make your own movie
that's what
more
I'm
interesting, and use it to
saying.
make your movie cheaper and more interesting and better. And like there was this big sorry, my brain is at like 70% today, maybe. But there was this controversy over Late Night with the Devil, which was my favorite movie of last year. And a couple of the interstitial cards in the movie were AI generated.
Yeah.
And people were freaking out about it because they're like, "Oh, that took a job away from artists." Like, get out of here. So what? I'm not supposed to
Those
use a new
artists
technology.
are doing that themselves. Like those
Bruh.
artists are using the technology.
They are absolutely using technology. So when we made The Mill, which is a movie that I made a couple years ago, which is about AI. It's about a guy's battle with an AI. He essentially gets imprisoned by AI and has to like figure his way out of this virtual AI prison. But when we made that movie, our budget was tight and we had to figure out how to do things that we just didn't know how we were going to do. Like we shot the movie and then we're like, okay, we got to make a character. We have to make the character speak. We have to take the movie. So the movie takes place in an open air prison. We had no skies. And so what we did was our artists, these are people who got paid well to do what they did. So we had fewer people getting paid better to make more things rather than just hiring an army of people. And so the things that they didn't have to do because they were able to do AI is like the tracking that was done to be able to create the sky. Our artists created these beautiful skies. One of the things I'm most proud of in the movie is how beautiful these skies look. He created those and then used AI to track it so that he didn't have to hire people to do it at like low paying rates. He could just use the AI and that he could keep the money to be able to afford to live. And similarly, our artists who created our Mallard character, the character had to react to what was being said. So he used AI to actually animate it so they could make this beautiful character and then use the AI to animate it. So that's an example to me of where AI, that movie doesn't exist in the form that it exists in now without AI. And this is no artists like were displaced as a result.
No.
It was the opposite.
I feel like people are making this like an excuse, like people are getting lazy. I think you're lazy if you're not learning how to use it. And like really
I completely agree. I couldn't agree more. That is the ultimate laziness. Like, so you're gonna tell me like that? Let's take this back. Like, sure, I love the way movies look shot on film. I wish more people would shoot on film. I'm very nostalgic for the look of film. I like the magic of shooting on film, but not really knowing what you got until you actually go to process it. I think that's all really cool, and I think it leads you to think about the way that you're working differently. So, like, yes, I get that, and I dig that. It's not financially possible for most movies, but I think. What's more, the film to digital is a slightly different thing. To me, where the AI comes into it is like, dude, your non-linear editing software uses AI. They just didn't call it AI yet. They called it machine learning.
Yeah.
Your Adobe Premiere, your Avid, like whatever you're using has machine learning. It has AI. You've been using it for 15 years. It just wasn't called AI, so you didn't think of it that way. So the same way, it's like, if you're telling me that I shouldn't use generative AI within the process of making my film, okay, then you can't use Premiere. Go back to shooting on film and cutting on a Steenbeck. I want to see you splicing film together because your nonlinear editing system has AI in it. Like that's just crazy. Why would anyone do
Mic drop. Yeah, no, it's crazy to me too.
But yeah, I don't know
It's
how we
like
got.
it's like being upset about someone using a new iPhone instead of like a Nokia. It's like it's just technology changes and evolves and it's just like you have to use it otherwise it's you're going to be behind. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, well, even look at like what we're doing right now. Okay, I
Uh-huh.
think that if you have a Hollywood, and I think these are part and parcel. This is, it seems like two different arguments. It's not two different arguments. Like, I think the anti AI and the social media, we can't compete with TikTok. Like, bro, if you have Hollywood resources and you can't compete with TikTok, you suck. Like, you
Exactly.
really
Yeah.
suck. And so,
Yeah.
like, use it. Like, what we're doing here, I think that we're creating, and, like, this is, I've struggled with this actually. I went through a brief period where I hated the word content because I felt like it was
Mhm.
devaluing art. But then I realized
Yeah.
I just had to adapt to the times of realizing that, like, no, these are different
Yeah.
things. Like, there's movies that are art, and then, like, what we're creating right now, I think is art, but it's also content. Like, call it content, that's
Yeah.
fine, I don't care. But we're
I literally
creating.
just went through this cuz I was doing this like magazine interview thing and I had to like say what I did. So I said I was an editor and I was like, "Can I say content creator?" And I was like embarrassed. I'm like, "Why am I embarrassed? That's what I do. I make content. It's just a word." Like,
It's just a word. It's just a word.
yeah.
And I think, yes, words have meaning, but I think content fills a void that's, it collects all these things, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there are, I think that content, it's a neat way of putting a bunch of different ideas and ways of bringing media or art into the world. Like, this
Mhm.
content that we're creating, our goal is to make people connect more deeply to art, to film. And
Mhm.
I think that this is helping film. I think that all the TikToks out there that people are creating, whether it's like, look at Dinner in America. We've talked about it before, but like, Dinner in
Yeah.
America has a resurgence. Dinner in America is a movie that Kaya and I both worked on in different ways, but that our friend Adam wrote and directed. That it premiered at Sundance. It was like loved by critics. It had struggled with distribution, and it really didn't start taking off in a massive way until TikTok picked up the music from the movie and people
Yeah.
started sharing it. And that is, I think, if I don't think, I think where here's this is where I think is really interesting is, I think that the ranks of Hollywood. Oh God, none of these people are ever going to give me work again, but who cares?
No
They, they
sponsors.
they never did to begin with. But the
True.
ranks of Hollywood that are worried and that think that Hollywood is dying, their place in Hollywood is going away, because
Yeah.
we don't. I don't think we as film audiences or we as filmmakers ever needed them. And that's like the bloat that's been there. I've been complaining about this for like 15 years, like ever since I got into the industry. When you look at how long it takes to set a meeting with people who are basically just in a position to tell you, they're terrified that they're going to lose their jobs, and so they're all sitting there making the most conservative decisions they can possibly make, but good. And I'm not talking about political conservatism, so just like, this is not a political discussion. They're making conservative artistic choices because they're afraid to lose their jobs, because if they take a big swing and it fails, they're going to they're the ones who are going to face the penalty for it. Whereas if they
Yeah.
take a safe bet and it fails, like, well, I did the safe thing. I don't know why it didn't work. It didn't work because people are watching TikTok. But ultimately, that leads
Mhm.
to really bad things. You just need to shake that system up every once in a while. Like, people from the outside need to come in, and there needs to be like a new ranks of executives that come from a different place. And or I think in the modern era, those ranks are just going to be much, 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 much thinner, because
Mhm.
the distance between artist and consumer is so short, is so small now. Like,
Yeah.
you and I, oh, that probably made a horrible noise when I hit that microphone. You and I can make a movie, and I can get it into theaters. Literally, you and me.
Mhm.
We could say, what do we have? We're going to shoot this thing. We're going to make a stop motion movie with I don't know, with Barbies. And
Mhm.
if it's good enough, we could go get that movie into theaters. This wasn't the case
Yeah.
10 years ago. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
And people are even talking about streaming, but coming from a guy who spent the last 2 years very deep in the streaming world, like, I don't know. I have a couple projects that I think are right for streaming, but they're all series. I think movies belong, and we've talked about this before, but I think that the path to getting movies into theaters isn't what it used to be. It doesn't take the massive expense that it used to. Like there's you can upload your movie to a server and get it into every theater in the country. Then you just need to be able to create awareness. Oh, what exists for creating awareness? Social media. So you don't need all the tools and all the money that you used to need to be able to get movies into theaters. This is a really long way of saying this movie to me was the perfect example of something that, like, yeah, to me this is a huge budget movie. I don't know, it was like 35 or 50 million or something. To Hollywood, that's a mid to small budget movie, and they need to be doing more of this because it works, less of those other things. Like, go make 5 of these and one of them's going to break out, as opposed to one $200 million movie that then costs $300 million to market. It's just the business model has changed, and I think there'll be smart studios that adapt, like the mini majors, like the Focuses and the A24s, who adapt. And I think you'll see some of that. I think you'll see consolidation. I think you'll see some of the legacy studios die. I don't think they're going to survive because they'll keep doing things the old way. I also think that the era of streaming dominance, yes, people are always going to stream, but I think that world's going to change too, because I don't think that the best filmmakers and the best actors, I think they will want to make movies or make streaming series, because that's a very specific thing. I don't think people are going to want to make movies for streaming much longer, if at all.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm so happy I saw this in the theater. This experience is not the same at home.
When I'm at home trying to watch a movie, I can't do it anymore, because we've been seeing these movies at the theater. I'm like, this is not good. This is like hurting me. And I've never been that way.
I've been watching
series at home.
I've been watching series. Well, even so I watched Criterion has Hitchcock for the holidays right now, so I've been watching all these Hitchcock movies. And the Hitchcock movies really still pull me in, but that's because I'm like forcing myself to. Like, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm watching. I'm not distracted while I'm doing that. But then similarly, I'm watching. I forgot Dune was definitely one of my favorite movies from last year, but I saw it so long ago that I forgot to add it to my favorite movies of 2024 list. I didn't, like an idiot, I didn't look at all the movies I saw last year. I just went off the top of my head. So I don't know which is more valuable. Sometimes it's looking at.
You need your own Letterboxd.
But yeah, I need my own Letterboxd. Well, I have this is so horribly nerdy. Every year for, I don't know, the past however many years, I make a spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet of all the movies I see, all the books I read, and now all the podcasts that I listen to.
No way.
And I chronicle
for how long have you been doing this?
I don't know, 6 years, 7 years. And
I would like to look at this.
So it's all, but interestingly enough, I think I had mentioned this to you on a run. I stopped making my movie list when we started doing the podcast.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm going to go back retroactively and fill it in, so I have it complete for last year. But I'm starting again for this year, and I'm not gonna lapse. I'm able to do both concurrently. But yeah, it's really fun to be able to go back and look at what you saw and kind of why you watched it. And I always put like who wrote it and directed it and all those fun details. So Dune, I've been watching the Dune prequel series right now, which is really good and really interesting. But I keep thinking when I'm watching it, I wish there was a way that instead of being 6 episodes, 6 1-hour episodes, that this was like 2 or 3 movies, and I could see it in the theater, because they create this lush world that's beautiful, and it's super cinematic, and it has the aesthetic of the movie, and it has the world building of the movies, but it's stuck on my TV screen, and I desperately want to see it in the theater, because I know that experience of watching Dune in the theater. It's an interesting thing for me to look at in terms of like where I started in the movie industry, because I started really professionally in the movie industry in 2008, which was during a recession and a writer's strike, and it was impossible to get anything made, like totally impossible. So we went and made a really small movie that ended up being successful, that was a ton of fun, and I loved making movies that way, and that kind of informed the way I like to make movies, because that was at a time similarly to now, like studios, streamers, they are not greenlighting stuff. They're taking meetings and sort of like pretending they're going to greenlight things, but they're not greenlighting. That was what that era was like. It's like nobody could make anything, so we're just like, okay, we're gonna go take the resources that we have and make this thing, and did it, and it worked, which it doesn't always work, but you know, no risk, no reward. But then things started to get better, and then it was crazy. Like the last few years of my career, there's just this massive streaming boom. And even the movies that I didn't make for streamers directly, they were able to get financed because ultimately there was streaming money out there that would pay for them on the back end. So like
Yeah.
the We Need to Do Some Things of the World and The Assistants and like all those movies don't exist without knowing that a streamer is going to come pay X amount of dollars for it once you go make the movie and if you make it independently. And that doesn't exist anymore. Like you
Yeah.
can make a movie now and there's no guarantee that Hulu's going to pay you anything close to what you made the movie for. They still might pay you a lot more than you made the movie for, but there's no guarantee. And so I think we're about to see this. I think it's just this combination of things. I think the combination of filmmaking technology continuing to get cheaper, the combination of that along with streamers not ordering as much and there being studios not ordering as much, there is such a massive opportunity for independent filmmakers to make movies that go to theaters, that become profitable in theaters, that then go interesting independent movies, by the way, not things that are just like, there's this very bad version of independent film that is just studio movies made cheaply. Don't do that. No one needs to be doing that. Like this is the time to make really interesting movies like Nosferatu, which is a 2 hour and 12-minute art film about desire essentially, and it's very personal, and that kind of thing can go and make its money back in a weekend. Do that.
That's nuts.
Like go do that. That's what people should be doing, and that's what I think as film I'm like trying to straddle the line here between filmmaker and film lover, but for film lovers I think this is a golden age of these types of movies that are going to be coming out. And I think it's just this is we were in an ebb and we're now in a flow.
Well said.
Let's see if the critics agree, because I have no idea. Let's go to Rotten Tomatoes first.
I actually didn't look.
I didn't either. Do you think Rotten Tomatoes is going to dig this?
Yes. It's been a while since we've looked at reviews, so I feel like, ooh, like this is weird.
So critics are saying 87%. And audience is saying 75%. What does some of the top critics say? We've got Adam Naiman from The Ringer. He didn't like it. Gorgeous yet inert. The cinematic equivalent of an exquisite corpse. There's no point in driving a stake through a heart that isn't beating in the first place. Disagree completely. I don't know where this dude's coming from. I thought that it was really clear what the beating heart of this movie to me. Like I clearly knew what, I guess, the four main characters. I'll say I understood deeply what Lily Rose Depp's character wanted, what Thomas wanted, what Willem Dafoe's character wanted, and what the Nosferatu wanted. Like those were clear driving forces that had a lot of meaning. Like I felt they all deeply wanted the things they wanted, right? Like Thomas wanted money. Ellen wanted sensuality and connection, and Willem Dafoe wanted knowledge, and then the Nosferatu wanted kind of like blood and blood. Yes. What did he say at one point? Like I am a hunger.
Yeah.
Something like that. He might have said it more eloquently.
That's in the original too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some version of that, some paraphrase of it is, okay, Wendy Ide from The Observer UK, there's a terrible beauty to it all and a seductive quality that makes Eggers' febrile gothic nightmare a hard thing to shake. I agree. The movie sticks with you. But what's interesting about this, that they say a seductive quality. Okay, brief departure from the reviews here is that I actually think what's interesting about Nosferatu, the original and this version versus other Dracula tales, is that there's like a complete lack of seduction. Like if you look at normal vampire tales, if you look at like Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, for instance, is out of control. But if you look at most versions of Dracula, he's this like look at Lestat from Interview with a Vampire, right? It's always these guys that have lived for, or guys or women that have lived for hundreds of years, or even like the underworld movies. They're rich, they're powerful, they're good looking, they're seductive in every imaginable way, and that you sort of always like want the vampire, right? You're attracted to the vampire in like a very deep way because they have all the things that
Yeah.
our contemporary society says you should want. Longevity, youth, eternal youth, all these things. And they take from it, right? It's like
Yeah.
the ultimate, like it's the ultimate capitalist metaphor. And this movie isn't that. It is,
Yeah,
but
no.
it's ugly. It's really
Yeah.
ugly.
I mean, there are moments, obviously, where it feels like very seductive and like sensual, but like for the most part, he's just like gross, like ugh, like
He's gross. He's disgusting. He's
why?
decrepit. His place is falling apart. He looks like he smells really bad. It's the
Yeah.
it is his mustache really bothers me. Like it's
Oh
really
my God,
disgusting.
it's really bad.
And I think that this to me is, if we're using vampires as a metaphor for capitalism, this to me is way more effective than the seductive vampire, because like ultimately, like yes, while there is that sensual connection and chemistry, I guess, between Ellen and Orlok, it ultimately, the end result of it always is just going to be him consuming her. And that's, if you want to look at like the more grotesque nature of our economic system, boom, it's right there. I
Yeah.
feel like you're onto some funny letterbox stuff. You got that
No,
look on
I'm
your
just
face.
I want to think about like there is something that I talked to you about when we were running about the Mormon glaze that people talk about online. They have like glossy eyes, like they have a certain look to them. And I totally feel that for certain movies. Like the Bob Dylan movie, there is a Mormon glaze over that movie. And someone said that you guys are glazers for liking this movie. But I don't know. I don't see it like that.
Wait,
This is
how is there a
not a glazer
glaze?
movie.
This is a grimy, disgusting
This is
movie.
disgusting. There's no Mormon glaze here.
Oh man, if you think this movie has a glaze, what are you watching?
Yeah, literally.
Okay, let's go to Letterbox. And I had a couple
These
more
are
notes here of things I wanted
hilarious.
to discuss. Oh, I can't wait. I haven't checked out Letterbox in a hot minute. Our last two episodes were unconventional episodes. This is our first time getting back to the grind. Would it be?
Yeah. Someone said, "Let me see Ellen's Hear Me Out cake." Have you seen this trend?
Uh-uh.
So girls are having cakes and they say "Hear me out," and they and their friends will print out pictures of like kind of ugly characters on TV, on cartoons or whatever, and you'll reveal it to each other and stick it in the cake. This is my "Hear me out." So like for example, one might be like Lightning McQueen is my "Hear me out" or something, like, and that's really funny because he's so ugly.
Yeah, he's hideous. This first a review. So many mustaches. Holy hell, this was dark. This is somebody we're friends with on here. Zach Taff. He's apparently our Letterbox friend. Holy hell, this was dark, figuratively and literally. An excellent take on Nosferatu. I agree. Let's see popular reviews. Ooh, this one has 14,000 likes.
Wow.
Lily Tor. So that's like Gen Z speak, right? What is Tor? Is that the new 8? So many relatable things about this
No,
movie.
I've never heard that.
Okay.
Continue.
Well, maybe it's a new one. So many relatable things about this movie. 1, being drawn to an ugly, evil guy, and even though everyone's against it, you just can't help it. 2, having to trick your husband into thinking he's saving the day so you can save the day. 3, not wanting people in your house too long. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, Z-Way has one here. She says, the dangers of a little crush.
People are saying absolutely delightful. It's the best Christmas movie.
Oh yeah, it is a Christmas movie. 100%
Yeah.
Christmas movie, by the way. This is like, what are the controversial Christmas movies? Mine is always Goodfellas. Everybody says Die Hard, but this is the new controversial Christmas movie.
Well, think
there
about
is-
like Edward Scissorhands. That's my favorite movie. That's a Christmas movie. It's
that's
giving
definitely a
that.
Christmas movie. Yeah. What is Tor? We're gonna have to look into this.
Dude, I have no idea.
Are you aging out of the lingo? Is that what?
No,
is
that's
what's
not a
happening
thing.
here?
It's not core. Maybe she meant core. Or they meant core. I don't know.
Maybe they meant she tore, like she tore it up.
Oh, yeah. It's not really slang. It's just
Somebody here says You're laughing. Nosferatu has a mustache, and you're laughing.
It's so bad. I wasn't like truly when I was watching the trailer, I wasn't really paying attention to like what he was looking like. I don't even know if they really showed him, but
They
when they
didn't.
first showed him in the movie, I was like, "Oh, they did him
Yeah,
dirty. He looks terrible."
it's pretty rough. Okay,
It's
I
comical.
I like this one. Okay, wow, there's so much I love. This is from It's Charlib. Says, okay, wow, there's so much I love about this movie. Some fave things. The shot of the black umbrellas in the rain on the cobbled street. I loved that too. It looked like animation. It
Hmm.
was incredible. The way the tears looked falling down people's faces, Lily Rose Depp
Yeah.
contorting, pretty much anything Lily did actually. Shadow of the hand moving across the city. Yeah, I mean that was great. That's like an iconic movie image. Willem Dafoe,
Yeah.
Isaac Newton name drop. The overall symmetry every time a door window opened. Shot of Nick walking down the pathway at night. Aaron TJ blood throw up on coffin moment. General sound of breathing throughout the movie. Overall costume department slay and so much more. I just really loved it. I'll probs watch it another 2 times this month. Go off, Robert Eggers.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, here's one. Pretty delicious. A girl cries out into the night begging for something to happen to her. Are girls born freaky or do they have freakiness thrust upon them? Lana Del Rey released Born to Die 13 years ago. The girl, particularly the millennial girl, as an agent in her own subjugation is familiar by now. Enter Christmas 2024, a Gen X baby girl, and in Nosferatu, a Gen Z coca-terrorist. That's a portmanteau I've never
No
heard.
way.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, honey. I'm not objective, but I think Depp is one of the best we've got. She's not afraid of the dark, and why should she be? She shows us that hell comes in through the front door because it is welcomed, because it can feel preferable to hearth and home. Maybe it isn't, not really, but Depp's Ellen is a quote-unquote sweet romantic. We were just talking about we need more romantics, new romantics movement. Soft
Yeah.
moans give way to flailing tongues and bent backs. Sue me, but I love to see it. Sometimes there's nothing left to but to marry the night. That was from Hari Neff. Hari Neff.
That was crazy.
Yeah, Hari Neff is an actor. I knew that name. Oh, she's in The Idol.
Oh, crazy. Is she one of
And
Lily's
Barbie.
friends?
That she I don't remember. Maybe she said she's not
Nosferatu.
partial. Yes, for Count Orlok is such a diva. That's a good one. All right. So a couple other things I wanted to mention. One is that Kai and I were talking about this while running. I can't find our window, where our window is. I had to switch
Oh my God.
from Chrome to Safari. What?
You.
Why?
I know what you're going to say. Continue.
Oh, we were talking. So, not that in my normal speech I necessarily curse a lot. Is this where you thought I was going?
Yeah, yeah.
Or somewhere else? Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So,
this.
but I've found myself holding back on this podcast
Yeah.
from times where I would normally say something and I would probably curse if I were talking to my friends or giving an interview or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But like, because it's your kid, I think some people aren't like this. Some people openly curse around the kids from the time they're very young. We are not like that in our house. We're not judging. It's just like, we just haven't done that.
No, we just haven't ever done that.
We just haven't ever done that. And so I don't know, we were running the other day and we were talking about the other day, it was like 2 weeks ago now, but I
Yeah.
was just wondering, like, in Kaya's normal speech with people, does she curse? Is she holding back on the podcast? And we realized that we both are holding back on the
Yeah.
podcast. And we're like, okay, we're just going to start speaking the way we normally speak. But we didn't do it. It still just feels weird. Like, I would feel the opposite. It feels like I'm not sure I ever will curse much on this podcast because
Yeah.
the same way that I think I'm censoring myself, I would actually be forcing the cursing into
Yeah,
it.
I feel the same way about it. Like, I think if it happens at this point for me. And I've never felt like I couldn't on here or with you. It's just like, I don't know. But then I think about the way that I like talk to people in everyday life and I feel like I swear a lot. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I
weird.
think
Maybe
I don't swear online though. I think that's the thing. Like
Mm.
I'll make like TikTok videos and stuff and I don't really swear in anything.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe we won't. Maybe we don't need to. If it happens, it happens. But I'm not.
Yeah.
I felt no need to curse at all today.
Yeah.
Fellow parents and kids dynamics out there. As your kids become adults, do you swear around them? Do they swear around you? We need answers.
I feel like it's
Or other
pretty
just like
normal.
kids. Like, when did you start swearing around your parents? If you ever did or
Yeah.
didn't you? Don't you?
Yeah.
What else? Did we miss anything? What are we seeing next week?
I was going to ask that. I have no idea, but it needs to be good. It needs to be something that doesn't make me feel sick all week. I felt sick all week.
I literally felt sick. I am sick. I got the plague. I caught the plague from Orlok's rats.
I could have. It looked like
It
I
was
would
like
have.
right when the rats were coming into the city, I started sweating.
Yeah,
Like actually
yeah.
sweating. There's this Pamela Anderson movie. Words I never thought would be coming out of my mouth in 2025.
There is?
Yes, that comes out Thursday here, so it probably comes out sooner for you.
Is
That
it The
looks
Last Showgirl?
good. Yes.
Oh, let's see that.
Yeah, let's see that. All right. It looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Gia Coppola. Why? Okay, this is seriously crazy. We need to break this down. The Coppolas are taking over our podcast. They came up multiple times in the last one. They came up. I talked about Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula in this, and now Gia Coppola is casually working our way into this episode. There's no less. Okay, I want to go back into every
like
episode.
our Roman Empire. Like she
Yes.
is.
This is nuts. I really want to go back and look. I want to do like a forensic study of our previous podcast to see if we've mentioned at least 2 Coppolas or Coppola related things in each episode. My guess is we have. Like, I can't, like,
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage is a Coppola. He's come up in a bunch of these. Jason Schwartzman
Yeah.
we had. He's a Coppola somehow. Like,
He is. Every episode. I swear to God.
okay, so which Coppola are we getting to come on one of these?
It's gotta be Gia.
Dude, okay, so listen to this. One time, my friend had this amazing book that he optioned called Droid Maker that is about, it's about George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and how they really created like modern cinema technology. And what's
Yeah.
really interesting about it is that who would you think between Francis and George would be the tech nerd?
Francis?
Yeah, it's Francis. I would have thought George.
Yeah.
He's the Star Wars guy. But he's THX. He's all those things. But I guess Francis
Poser.
is really
Poser.
like... You're the first person in history to call George Lucas a poser. but Francis was really the tech guy. And Francis, I guess, apparently, according to... So anyways, we get the rights to this book. We wanted to make it into a podcast or a documentary series several years ago. But we knew this only works if you get George and Francis, right? You need those 2 guys. And I'm thinking these are guys in their like late 70s, early 80s. People typically of that age like to talk about the great things that they've done. This probably isn't going to be that hard. So I get through a couple of friends, I get to somebody who knows both George and Francis. And he's like, well, look, I'm going to tell you the way this is going to go down is they'll never admit this in public. But the way the relationship works is that George is probably going to be ambivalent and he'll say, I'll do it if Francis will do it. And 50-50 shot. It's like, how is Francis feeling on the day that we call him? So anyways, the guy's like, but I have to call George first just because that's the relationship I have. So the guy calls George. George very predictably is like, if you can do it around my schedule. And if Francis says he'll do it, then, sure. Well, I'll do it. So I'm stoked, right? I'm thinking, oh my God, if we get George and Francis, we are making this thing. It's just incredible. Like it's all the stories that you haven't heard about what these guys did and their contributions to cinema. It's like the coolest thing ever. And so then he takes him a while. He gets a hold of Francis. Francis's response was, "Why would I do this? Why would I do this?" And when you but I started to look at it, and like to me, it's very exciting because you see all of he just made Megalopolis and he put his own money into it. He financed that movie for like $100 million or whatever it was. But his whole life has been that. He's gone bankrupt a whole bunch of times because he built, at one point, he wanted to build this like little mobile production facility that American Zoetrope would have, where he would have like a trailer and he could have all the equipment he needed to make a movie, to edit it, to do all the posts, do everything. And he was just constantly like going and making a bunch of money, doing other things, pouring it into his passion projects and losing everything. So like it was probably really painful for him. For me, as an outsider, it's like this dude believed in what he was doing. He wanted to be able to take cinematic arts to a new level, and that was super exciting. But to him, it's probably like traumatic.
Yeah.
He, like, lost all these things and then ended up being a winemaker and selling his wine company to go make this movie. But I digress. Somehow we're talking about Nosferatu and it leads to the Coppolas, but that's a natural one, right?
All roads lead back.
All roads lead to the Coppolas. I want a graphic. Design a graphic for me. That's like all these different movies and like twists and turns that all lead back to like the Coppola dynasty.
Oh my god, we should do that one day.
We need one of them. One of them has to come on this.
In your office. Oh my god.
Okay. We can do it. I want it to look like a serial killer's lair.
Yeah.
But so if you had to take a bet before we close this one up, of which Coppola would be the one that we could get? I'm serious. I'm just going to start emailing Coppolas, like left and right, trying to get them on.
Definitely Coconut Radio, Jason Schwartzman. Yeah.
But
I feel like he'd be very easy.
If we're seeing The Last Showgirl, Gia Coppola's definitely doing press right now.
She must be. She must.
All right.
This could be good. This could be so good.
Okay, warning shot. For the new year, for 2025, Coppola's, we're coming after you.
Yeah.
Not in a scary way. Not in a negative way. Just to get you on our podcast.
No, you're a Roman Empire, I guess.
Yes. All right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Love the movie. Nosferatu's awesome. I don't think it... I really, really was looking forward to this, and I don't think it underdelivered. I think it was very hard to meet my expectations, but it did, and in some ways surpassed them. Yeah. I encourage people to run, not walk, to see this movie.
Tight. Sick.
All right. We'll see you back next week.
Woo. Swag money YOLO.
Happy New Year 2025.